Get ready, because this is going to blow your mind. Bill Maher, the undisputed heavyweight champion of political incorrectness, recently tore into the very fabric of modern woke culture. But here's the twist. He didn't do it in the way you might think. This wasn't a simple partisan rant or a predictable tirade. It was a surgical, multi-pronged assault on hypocrisy, delivered with the kind of acerbic wit that has kept him at the center of the cultural conversation for decades. We're going to dissect the 7 most impactful moments from his recent broadcasts, culminating in the legendary critique that has everyone talking: his woke Olympics smackdown. Stay with us as we count down the moments that prove why, love him or hate him, you simply cannot ignore Bill Maher. Now, before we dive into the countdown, let's set the stage. Who exactly is Bill Maher in 2024? For over 30 years, first with Politically Incorrect, and now with HBO's Real Time, he's carved out a unique space in the American media landscape. He's a self-proclaimed liberal, yet he spends as much, if not more, time lambasting the left as he does the right. This has made him a political enigma. To his fans, he's a bastion of common sense in a world gone mad, a fearless truth-teller who champions free speech above all else. To his detractors, he's a cranky boomer, out of touch with modern sensibilities, whose critiques often punch down and miss the point entirely. The truth, as it so often does, probably lies somewhere in the messy middle. Maher operates as an equal opportunity offender, a comedian whose primary allegiance isn't to a party but to a principle: that no idea, no person, and no institution should be immune from ridicule. It's this foundational belief that fuels the fire in his monologues and makes his show a weekly flashpoint for debate. He's the guy who will have a progressive activist and a conservative firebrand on the same panel, not just for fireworks, but to genuinely probe the boundaries of their beliefs. This context is crucial, because it explains why his critiques, especially of his own side, land with such explosive force. He isn't an outsider throwing rocks. He's a disillusioned insider pointing out the cracks in the foundation. With that in mind, let's begin our countdown of the 7 moments that define Maher's modern crusade. Coming in at number 7, the generational stand-up. Maher at his core is a stand-up comedian from a different era. A recurring theme in his work is the widening chasm between his generation's understanding of humor and that of millennials and Gen Z. In a recent monologue, he quipped that comedians today need a lawyer to read their set list before they go on stage. He paints a picture of a world where the primary goal of a joke isn't laughter, but to pass a purity test. Why did this land? Because it taps into a genuine anxiety shared by many, not just comedians, that the rules of social engagement have become impossibly complex and punitive. It resonates with anyone who's ever hesitated before telling a joke, worried it might be misinterpreted. The counterpoint, of course, is that this isn't about being overly sensitive. It's about being more conscious. Younger generations would argue that what Maher sees as walking on eggshells, they see as basic empathy and a long overdue refusal to use marginalized groups as punchlines. For them, comedy should challenge power structures, not reinforce old stereotypes. But for Maher, the line is clear. If it's funny, it's funny. And the idea that humor should be neutered by ideology is, to him, the biggest joke of all. At number 6, the COVID contrarian. Few topics have been as polarizing as the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and Maher waded right into the thick of it. While much of the media on the left advocated for stricter mandates and protocols, Maher became a prominent skeptical voice. He consistently questioned the long-term lockdowns, the efficacy of certain measures for the general population, and what he saw as a culture of fear-mongering. He famously argued that the media and public health officials were failing to consider the immense collateral damage, mental health crises, economic devastation, and educational setbacks. This take was potent because it gave voice to a silent, lockdown-fatigued minority who felt their legitimate concerns were being dismissed as selfish or anti-science. He wasn't denying the virus, he was questioning the proportionality of the response. The counter-argument is stark and serious. Public health officials argue that his commentary oversimplified a complex crisis and potentially undermined efforts to save lives. They contend that measures like lockdowns and mandates, however painful, were necessary evils to prevent the collapse of healthcare systems. For them, Maher's focus on individual liberties during a collective crisis was dangerously myopic. But in Maher's world, questioning authority is never dangerous. It's essential. Number 5. The presentism problem. This is a more intellectual, but no less fiery, Maher critique. He has repeatedly gone after what historians call presentism, the act of judging historical figures by the moral standards of today. He argues that while it's essential to acknowledge the flaws and atrocities of the past, it's intellectually dishonest to expect figures from the 18th century to hold 21st century values. He'll point to the tearing down of statues or the renaming of buildings and ask, where does it end? Is anyone in history pure enough to survive this modern inquisition? This resonates because it speaks to a sense of cultural vertigo, a feeling that we're erasing our own complex history in a fit of moral righteousness. It's a defense of nuance over absolutism. The powerful counterpoint is that this isn't about erasing history. It's about choosing who we celebrate. Activists argue that continuing to honor figures who committed or profited from heinous acts sends a message that those acts are still acceptable on some level. It's not about judging the past, but about defining the values of the present. For them, a statue in a public square isn't a history lesson, it's an endorsement. Maher, however, sees it as a slippery slope toward a sanitized and ultimately false version of the past. And now for number 4, the sharp jab at cancel culture. This is a classic Maher haymaker. In one of his signature New Rules segments, he delivered a blistering one-liner that landed like a mic drop. He declared, "The party of no labels is now the party of no jobs." This quick, sharp jab perfectly encapsulated his frustration with what he perceives as the left's tendency to engage in cancel culture, the practice of professionally and socially ostracizing individuals for perceived transgressions, often from their distant past. The line hit hard because of its brutal simplicity. It weaponized the left's own language against it, highlighting a perceived hypocrisy. It landed with his audience, and many others, who feel the punishment for misspeaking or holding an unpopular opinion has become disproportionately severe. The counterargument is that cancel culture is a right-wing phantom. Proponents of what Maher is critiquing would call it accountability culture. They argue that for too long, powerful people have been able to cause harm without consequence. This movement, they say, is simply about marginalized communities finally finding the collective power to hold people accountable for their words and actions. It's not about censorship, it's about consequences. But for Maher, the movement has morphed into a merciless, unforgiving mob that has lost all sense of proportion, and ironically, all sense of liberal tolerance. Cracking the top 3, at number 3, the takedown of performative politics. Here, Maher reminds us he skewers both the left and the right with equal glee. He has a special disdain for what he calls performative politics, the act of making symbolic gestures that signal virtue without achieving any substantive change. He'll mock Democrats for wearing kente cloth or Republicans for posing with assault rifles, arguing that both are empty theatrics designed to energize their base, rather than solve actual problems. He famously said, "Politicians are like the thoughts and prayers of getting things done." This critique is so effective because it transcends the political divide. It appeals to the widespread public cynicism that politicians are more interested in scoring points on social media than in passing meaningful legislation. It's a takedown of style over substance. The counterpoint is that symbols matter. A politician taking a knee or wearing a flag pin isn't just performance. It's a powerful act of communication that signals solidarity and values to millions. These gestures can inspire movements and galvanize voters, which is a necessary precursor to legislative action. But in Maher's view, the performance has become the entire show, and the actual work of governing has been forgotten. Our runner-up at number 2, the fat acceptance controversy. If you want to see Maher at his most provocative, look no further. He took direct aim at the fat acceptance movement, arguing that while shaming people is wrong, normalizing and even celebrating clinically unhealthy lifestyles is a dangerous fantasy. He stated bluntly that being fat isn't a birth defect, and that there's a difference between body positivity and ignoring a national health crisis. This moment was incendiary. It landed because it articulated a viewpoint that many people hold privately, but are terrified to say publicly for fear of being labeled fat-phobic. Maher positioned himself as the guy willing to say the uncomfortable, but, in his view, medically sound truth. The backlash was immediate and immense. Critics argued that he was conflating health with weight in a simplistic way, ignoring the complex genetic, socioeconomic and psychological factors behind obesity. They accused him of promoting shame, which studies show is counterproductive to healthy living. The body positivity movement argues that self-love and acceptance are the first steps toward well-being, and that Maher's approach was nothing more than old-fashioned bullying disguised as concern. This debate placed free speech directly against social sensitivity, and Maher planted his flag firmly on the side of what he called reality. And now, the number 1 Bill Maher moment that sparked a firestorm: the woke Olympics critique. This was the big one. Originally from a monologue during the Tokyo 2021 Games, its relevance has only grown. Maher looked at the American media coverage and athlete protests and saw not patriotism or progress, but a festival of self-loathing. He roasted what he saw as the relentless focus on America's flaws, even on a stage meant for national unity. He quipped that the American delegation seemed to be competing in the woke Olympics, where the goal was to show how much you hated your own country. He pointed to athletes protesting the flag, and commentators framing every event through a lens of social grievance. Why did this cause such an earthquake? Because it weaponized patriotism against progressivism. It tapped into a deep-seated frustration among many Americans who feel that national pride has become a taboo subject on the left. He argued that you can acknowledge a country's sins without defining it entirely by them. The counter-argument is that patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's the desire to make your country better. For many, using the global stage of the Olympics to highlight issues like racial injustice isn't hating America. It's exercising a fundamental American right to demand that the nation live up to its own ideals. They see it as the highest form of patriotism. But Maher saw it as a joyless, navel-gazing spectacle that alienated the very people it was trying to persuade. He roasted the overreach, the woke signaling, and the performative self-flagellation, sparking a massive debate about the intersection of free speech, sports, and national identity. So what's the ultimate takeaway from all this? Maher's enduring power lies in his ability to occupy the space where free speech clashes with social progress. He forces uncomfortable conversations by asking, at what point does righteous activism become self-righteous performance? When does accountability become unforgiving cancellation? And when does a healthy critique of one's country curdle into unproductive contempt? His critics are right that he can be simplistic, and his boomer perspective can feel dated. But his supporters would argue that he's a necessary check on ideological excess, a court jester who's not afraid to tell the king he has no clothes, regardless of which party the king belongs to. With real time renewed through 2028, it's clear that Maher's voice isn't going away anytime soon. He continues to book guests from across the spectrum, from legends like Paul Anka to controversial figures like Representative Lauren Boebert, ensuring the conversation remains unpredictable and volatile. Whether you see him as a vital cultural critic or a relic of a bygone era, one thing is undeniable. Bill Maher still knows how to spark the conversation. What do you think? Is Maher a truth teller, or is he out of touch? Drop your take in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep dives that cut through the noise, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who loves a good debate. We've got more rapid-fire takes coming your way. Thanks for watching.